I'm Rachel Belle, and this is Your Last Meal, the show where celebrities share stories about the foods they love most, and we dig into the history, the culture, or the science of those meals with experts from around the world. Today on the program, Karen Akunowicz, the James Beard Award-winning chef who competed on Top Chef All-Stars, and Netflix's Tournament of Champions. She is chef-owner of Boston's Bar Volpe and Fox and the Knife, which was named Best New Restaurant in America in 2019 by Food & Wine Magazine, Eater, and USA Today. Karen and I rank French fries from best to worst. She talks about her toddler's bougie taste in food and tells the story of how she took up cooking to try and get someone to fall in love with her. Later in the show, I chat with John Birdsall, author of the book, What is Queer Food? But first, my conversation with Karen Akunowicz. I read an article where you said restaurants are magic, and that's something that came from your childhood. Could you kind of start with childhood and talk about why restaurants were so magical to you as a kid?
Yeah, I mean, restaurants to me as a kid were so magical. We didn't go out very much. We didn't have a lot of money. So when we went somewhere, when we went to a restaurant, no matter how casual, it was such a big deal. And I think that they made me feel like a grown-up. They felt really special. I felt really included in what my mom or my parents were doing. And I just felt, it made me feel so good to be there. And I think that I've carried that with me my whole life. Restaurants for me are always the place that I want to. You have some great news to share? Let's meet in a restaurant. Something terrible has happened. Please meet me for dinner and a drink. We want to grieve. We want to bond. We go to our favorite restaurant and we get together. And I think they just hold a really special place in my heart. And I think, of course, to so many others.
I was the same as you as a kid. And I remember being so excited to go to Sizzler, like places
Red
like
Lobster
that.
For me, Red Lobster.
That's the other one I was thinking. Yes. And it's funny because my family actually, like my dad was very big on us going to get dim sum and things like that. But it was like those places that seemed very fun for some reason, those like middle America chains.
Of course. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm curious what you think, if you've noticed this too, because I think from, our general generation, it just wasn't as common to go out to eat all the time. And I think we live in more of a restaurant culture now. And I see my friends and their kids, and it feels like their kids are so used to it that it doesn't seem like a big deal or special anymore. Have you noticed that too?
I see that and I get that. And I do think it's true. I do think people go out a lot more. And thank you to all of you who go out and who come to my restaurants. But even my kid, I have a 2.5-year-old. And this girl loves nothing more than to go to lunch. Rogi go lunch. She wants to go out to lunch. I mean, she's also my daughter. So when I'm like, okay, we'll go to swim class and then we'll do a little shopping. We'll go to Anthro and then we'll get lunch. And she's like, ooh, Rogi go to lunch.
Oh.
Like, I think for her, even though she's grown up in restaurants, like I think she has that feeling of it being special. Now, I will say as a chef's kid, I was with one of my dearest friends who's also a chef the other day, and she has 2 girls. And we were talking about how, our kids go out a lot. They're exposed to a lot of different food, which is wonderful. And people are like, oh, it's so great. My kid loves seafood. They're like, oh, so wonderful. I'm like, yeah, it's wonderful until she's 2 years old and you're ordering her the $45 scallops and she won't even look at the kids menu.
Yes, exactly.
So that is also
these little bougie babies.
Oh, she's my broke bestie. She is a little bougie baby. She's like, I'll say, what do you want to have for lunch today when it's like, it's her mama day? Sushi. Well, she was walking the other day with my spouse and I got a text that said, Rogue just said she wanted lobster for lunch.
My God.
Like, oh. Perfect.
Okay, queen.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, she is the queen.
What was a favorite place when you were a kid? What's a memory that you have?
So there was this place in my hometown of Kearney, New Jersey. And actually, it was probably in North Arlington if we're splitting hairs. It was called Egan's. And it had 2 aspects to the restaurant. In the front was fast casual. You would go up to the counter and you would order, and there were bright orange booths. And you would order, it was hot dogs, it was French fries. In New Jersey, disco fries are really big. So fries with cheese, melted American cheese and gravy, really big. And I remember the waitresses, when you ordered French fries, they would call it back. It was like short order. And they would call it back to the cooks and they would say, 1 Frenchie with gravy, 1. And it's like, one of my favorite memories. But In the back of the restaurant was the fancy part of the restaurant. Dark wood paneling. There was a swordfish hanging over the bar. Why, I don't know. It was not a seafood restaurant. I do believe, to my memory. And it was dark, right? And there were candles and it was dark. And to me, that was so fancy, so elegant, so grown up. So if you went to Egan's and you went to the back room of Egan's, I thought that was like just the best. But I loved if my dad was like, we'll go to Egan's for dinner and we got French fries and hot dogs. The best.
You know where your daughter would be. She'd be there in the back.
She'd be in the back.
She'd be in the back. She's fancy.
Yes, that kid.
I feel like you have to do something with that name for like something that you have to name in the future restaurant. Like the Frenchie part, Frenchie with gravy. It's so good.
It's so good. It's so clear in my head.
Yeah.
It's such like a core. I feel like it's like a core memory.
Yeah. So what would your last meal be?
Oh my gosh. So I have thought almost incessantly about this, but I know the answer. And I was like, oh, Karen, I think I was I was like, am I coming up with the right answer? I know what it would be. My last meal would be Maine lobster steamed with, I want to say French fries, a slightly dirty martini, corn, but I'm actually going to say onion rings because there's this amazing lobster place. I live in Boston. I have a house in Maine, in Midcoast, Maine. There is a place called Five Islands Lobster. It is my favorite place in the world. And they make these homemade onion rings and they make these dipping sauces. They make a mustard dill dipping sauce. They make a cilantro dipping sauce. And part of food, right, is how great it tastes. Part of food is who you're eating with. Part of food is where you're eating, right? Food is such like a core memory for us in so many places. And some of my happiest meals have been sitting on that pier. They catch the lobster right out of the ocean. They boil the corn in the seawater. So I would have to say that it's Maine lobster, hand-breaded onion rings, corn cooked in seawater, salt with lots of butter on it, a little malt vinegar for the onion rings, and maybe like a very crisp glass of rosé. And I hope that if I wasn't sitting on that pier in the sunshine in Maine, in my favorite place, that it at least reminded me of that.
I love that answer. I love that. And you're such a Northeast gal.
Oh, I am. Let me tell you, and summer, like New England summer, man, it is good. I know we're the prettiest girl at the party in the fall. It's like leaf peeping and all that, but like New England summers are good. They're really good. And one of my happiest moments was when I got to take my daughter for the first time to Five Islands. And let me tell you, that's where that kid learned about lobster. I have a picture of her every summer, just like this like little baby, like chubby faced little baby, like eating corn. And she only likes the lobster if I get I tried to give her a lobster roll. I was like, oh, this would be easy for you. No, she would like me to personally break down the lobster. So it's
royalty once again.
I know, it's just the best place in the world, and you're right on the water, and you can look out at the Five Islands that it was named after, and it's the best of Migliore.
When you said the meal, I immediately thought summer. Because I mean, you can just feel the glow off of your words of all of those summery foods. So the onion rings, do you like beer battered, or you said breaded? Is that more like the breadcrumby ones?
So I have to tell you, I am not going to go somewhere and order onion rings. I'm a French fry girl. I love French fries. My spouse is an onion ring person, but this place, they're breaded. They're not beer battered, but they're hand cut, they're hand breaded, and they are so, so good.
This is the third time this has come up for me this week. So I was saying to my friend, because the only time I eat onion rings, I'm a big hiker. I live in Seattle. When I come back from a hike, there's often some like little roadside cute, vintagey burger stand. And that's where I'll get onion rings. My theory is that you'll have a better chance of having good onion rings than you will fries. With the fries, it could be like any number of cuts. They could be frozen or not frozen. It could be anything.
It says fries. It could literally, who knows what you're going to get?
Yeah. So I feel like you know what you're getting more. And the onion rings I don't know if I've ever really had a bad one.
Yeah, they're pretty special. I actually had steak frites the other night. And when they came, I was expecting like shoestring French fries. Yeah. And they were like very medium. I mean, they were good. They were French fries. They were very medium French fries. And they came to the table and I was like, not what I was expecting. French fries could be anything.
Okay, let's rank your fries then from top to bottom style wise. What's your number one? And what is the one that you're like, eh?
Oh, I mean, I'm not a shoestring, but a skinny fry, like a crisp, skinny fry girl. I will take like a Belgian fry, like a more medium sized fry. Like, okay, I don't like sweet potato fries. I'll take a waffle fry if it's offered. I'll go for it. I'll take one of those. Crinkle fries, sometimes they have to be very like if they are very, very crisp, they're great because you get a little more crispiness. But if they're not perfectly done, they're just a little bit soggy. And I'll say bottom of my list is steak fries.
Yeah. I don't see those around that much anymore. Maybe everyone hates them.
Because it's too much potato to outside crisp ratio. It's not correct.
For her last meal, Karen Akunowicz wants steamed Maine lobster, hand-breaded onion rings, corn cooked in seawater, and a crisp glass of rosé at Five Islands Lobster in Georgetown, Maine. My fry ranking is very easy. Belgian frites are at the tippy top. You know these fries. Skin on, medium-sized square batons that are nice and crisp, bronzed on the outside, and just a little bit creamy inside. My least favorite fry is also crystal clear. Crinkle cut. They are on the very bottom. I can easily say no to a crinkle. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you realize that we left so many fry shapes out? If so, send me a message and tell me about your favorite fries, either on Instagram or you can find my email at cascadepbs.org. Okay, after the break, Karen tells me what sparked her love for cooking. I'll give you a spoiler. She was trying to get her coworker to fall in love with her. And can food be queer? Can it be gay? Can it be lesbian? I chat with John Birdsall, author of the new book, What is Queer Food? What sparked your love for cooking?
Oh, my love for cooking. So I mean, I always say I've always loved food. But my love for cooking didn't really come about. And also, I've always loved food. And also, I've worked in restaurants for a really, really long time. I've been working in restaurants since I was 17 years old.
What was your first job?
Waitress in a diner in New Jersey. I mean, I wore the white tuxedo shirt, black polyester vest, black polyester pants. I was the youngest person that maybe has ever worked there. Restaurants and food and being with family are a big part of my DNA, but I didn't start cooking until I was in my 20s. And I was trying to impress a girl. I was trying to get her to go out on a date with me. And like, I kept flirting with her and she was not that interested. And one day I was like, well, you should let me, we worked together. I said, you should let me cook you dinner. She was like, great, what time? I'll come over. And I was kind of like,
Now I got to do it.
But I didn't cook at that point. I didn't cook. I lived alone. I was like, oh my gosh. And I went out and I bought a cookbook and I went to Whole Foods. I walked to Whole Foods. I didn't have a car. It was pretty close to my house. I spent more on groceries than I had like ever spent in my life. And I made pasta puttanesca and I fell in love. I mean, I with the girl as well. Certainly no longer. But I fell in love with cooking. I had never put ingredients together in that way. I had never cooked in that way before. And it felt like, much how I feel about restaurants, it really felt like magic, it all coming together. And I felt like, I was like, I am an amazing cook. I made this food. This is amazing. And I look back on it and I'm sure it was not. I'm sure like I really didn't know what I was doing. I'm sure it wasn't very good. But in that moment, the cooking for somebody else is a big piece of it. The putting the ingredients together, watching them come together as a dish, amazing. And that really for me, I think was that was the aha. That was the it moment.
And it sounds like it worked. It wasn't the only date.
Oh, it did indeed. It did indeed. Yes, I was still cooking. We were still together for 3 years. But you know, I always say with my spouse, I was trying to get them to fall in love with me, and they were sick, and I made them like a squash and coconut soup and sent it home with it. Like had a friend of mine like drop it off at their house, and I'll always say, I feel like that's what sealed the deal. They like wrote me a thank you card and in the form of a mixtape. I wrote all these songs to make like a little letter in a card.
Ugh.
And then was that squash soup that started it all.
So wait, let's get the air on this. Was this a mixed CD? Was this a mixed playlist, or was this a cassette tape?
It was like they like cut out a picture of a cassette tape, and then they wrote a whole thank you card using the titles of songs.
That must have taken a really long time to like form sentences only using the name of songs. Yes. Wow. Okay. That soup worked.
It was pretty amazing. I still have it.
I saw that you were at the first Big Queer Food Fest in Boston. And I just kind of wanted to ask about it. I know it wasn't your event that you put on, but I was reading on the website and I just really loved all of the details and what it stood for. And I'm just going to kind of read something that they wrote and just see if you kind of have any insight. And I know I didn't prepare you for this, but it says, educating the world on the richness of queer culinary heritage and lasting influence on American gastronomic landscape. I'm wondering just if you have any knowledge of this, how food has been influenced, by queer people, how that comes in a historical context.
I was just texting with David and Chad, who own and run the festival. But here's the thing. I mean, is food inherently anything? Is food male? Is it female? Is it, no, but queer people have been making food forever. We've been in a very important part of the foodways, and we've been in a very important part of the restaurant industry, right? And I think that it often it's like, oh, there's a food festival and here's a panel that has some queer people on it. Or here's a small dinner, or here it's sort of sidelined. And this is shining a light on queer people and the food that we are making all over the country. And it is making sure that it's front and center. It's the most important piece of the conversation. It is the whole conversation, and to be honest, in a time where it really feels like we are being erased, I think it's even more important than ever for our community to come together and be in the light, as well as our allies who support us, and to lift everybody up and shine a light and make sure everybody knows that we're not going anywhere.
Yes. I didn't know until the last couple of years that James Beard was a gay man. I heard some podcast and I was like, oh, I had no idea.
Oh, yeah, he's gay. He family.
Yeah. Yeah. In 2014, I read an essay in Lucky Peach magazine, RIP to the coolest food magazine of all time. The essay was by John Birdsall, titled, America, Your Food is So Gay. The piece looks at the influence that queer food writers and cooks like James Beard and Craig Claiborne, who was the New York Times food critic and editor from the 50s to the 80s, had on greater American food culture. It was such a good piece that John won a James Beard Award for it. Last year, he published a book called What is Queer Food? How We Served a Revolution. The book includes that essay. More than a decade later, I still remember his piece. And the most memorable part is the personal story that it opens with. John paints a vivid picture of Pat and Lou, the gay couple who lived in his Bay Area neighborhood in the 1960s. John says all his neighbors were homophobic and hated Pat and Lou, except for his parents. Pat and Lou would babysit for John and his brother when his parents went out to dinner. And they would cook for you. Can you talk about the burger that you describe as, I see them now, those burgers, as unflinchingly, unapologetically, magnificently queer?
Yes, the queer burger. I was quite young. I was 10 when my uncle, I call them my uncles, when my uncle Pat died, and this whole kind of magical world of these neighbors disappeared for me. But when I was a boy, my parents became very, very close to Pat and Lou, and we spent a lot of time over there. They would babysit for me and my older brother, sometimes when my parents wanted a night on the town. And of course, they would cook for us. And Lou, who did the cooking, just had this like crazy, grand, magnanimous idea of food. Crazy for me because I was used to, my mom's quite delicious cooking, but her cooking was, it had to fit into the weekly budget. It had to be nutritious by the standards of the 1960s. But Lou's just soared. It was completely probably inappropriate to feed a child because it was so rich and delicious and had so much flavor and salt. But burgers were really something that he would treat us with. And they were unlike any burger either that my mom made or that I would have had in a fast food place. They were thick. His famous burger had a layer of blue cheese and Dijon mustard, and I think caramelized onions on it as well. I think I could only eat a little bit of that burger before I probably ultimately felt sick. But it opened up this world of like food could be something that didn't just need to be eaten with a glass of milk on a weeknight. Food could be this thing that was really this expression of intensity, of pleasure, of joy in the moment. That really stuck with me. And later on, when I was a young cook and started reading cookbooks, and started reading, for instance, James Beard, and I had this flash of recognition that the kind of food that, my Uncle Lou was cooking for me in the 1960s, maybe it even came from James Beard cookbooks, but it had this same sense of risky, transgressive, pleasure forward enjoyment.
Yeah. And what do you think it is about the food that Lou was making and the food that James Beard was making, which was a lot about, like you say, richness and luxury? What is either the metaphor or just the direct link to queerness?
This sort of Calvinist tradition in America of being reluctant or apologetic about pleasure, about enjoyment. I saw a direct link between the pleasure of eating, the pleasure of food in those texts, James Beard's cookbooks, and this idea of queerness as pleasure, this transgressive idea of sexuality in 20th century America, where queerness in particular, but also the idea of women enjoying pleasure, an author like MFK Fisher, for instance, that was policed in American culture. The culture tried to control pleasure, tried to control transgressive desire, sexuality, of course, but also in food. I mean, the amazing thing about James Beard and also Craig Claiborne and also Alice B. Toklas, these 20th century authors of cookbooks in the United States in a really repressive time, was that they were writing cookbooks. Cookbooks were a genre that was seen as just practical information. And to introduce the idea and really champion the idea that these recipes in these books, this cooking that you could do every day, not just on fancy occasions, could be deeply pleasurable, could challenge your ideas of what was proper decorum. So this became an idea that I couldn't let go of.
As much as I would love to share all the poignant, clever, interesting bits of that essay with you, it's so much better if you read it in John's words. I have added a link to the Lucky Peach piece in the show notes. But let's get back to John's book and a story about the queer man who invented the chiffon cake. This story starts in the 1920s.
So Harry Baker was an insurance salesman who lived in Ohio, and he married and started a family and then was arrested in Ohio by a vice officer for soliciting sex with another man. And it completely ruined his life. It made working as an insurance salesman in Ohio impossible. He left and moved to LA, basically abandoned his family, moved to LA to start a new life. But there were all kinds of difficulties about starting a new life when you had this shadow behind you of arrest and scandal. And so he had always been good at baking. He used to bake in his office as an insurance salesman. And so to make a living, he started out making fudge and selling it to a community cafe, and then devised this cake to sell as well. He made many versions of this cake before he came up with what he thought was the perfect one. It took off. And his main customer became the Brown Derby restaurants, which were places where Hollywood stars, Hollywood royalty would hang out, do deals, be seen. And Harry's cake was the first dessert that they put on the menu. They called it simply cake.
I love that.
Yeah, and it became this thing. He had all these offers to, divulge the recipe. He refused to teach the Brown Derby chefs how to make his cake. So he continued making it out of his home. He set up these portable ovens in a spare bedroom and churned out these cakes. Eleanor Roosevelt was in LA. She tasted it and invited him to come to the White House and teach the White House chefs how to make it. He refused.
Oh.
When he got older, when he was in his 60s and was probably tired of baking cakes every day, he actually sold the recipe to General Mills for an undisclosed sum. But this myth has arisen that it was this fabulous. Did he sell it for $50,000 or $20,000? So he sold it to General Mills, which of course had the Betty Crocker brand. Of course, Betty Crocker was not a real person. And so they branded it as Betty Crocker chiffon cake. They really marketed the heck out of it. They called it the first major cake development in 100 years. Like, this was the cake of the century. You had to make this cake. And in order to make this cake properly, of course, you had to buy General Mills flour and use the Betty Crocker recipe. I see Harry Baker as an example of somebody who was essentially a queer food maker who created this thing that America ended up loving, but he couldn't be acknowledged as the creator of this thing. It only took off when essentially his fingerprints were erased from this cake, when it became a Betty Crocker cake. And I thought it was really illustrative.
Have you ever baked the cake?
I have never baked the cake. I have to say, I'm really ashamed. I'm a terrible cake baker. I've made other recipes that I mentioned in the book, but that one has made me nervous. And I think maybe partly I've kind of bought the General Mills line. I'm like, I can't use like King Arthur flour or like the organic flour in bulk that I would buy at my local market. I have to go buy like General Mills flour to make this work.
The capitalism is alive.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I can't resist.
It's probably true, though. I mean, that's been a thing I've heard over the years. Certain podcasts, people call in, this was my grandma's recipe and I can't get it to work. And, the flour is different. The eggs are different sizes. The butter is different than it used to be. So it might actually make a difference.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the 1950s lesbian potluck culture?
1950s lesbian potluck culture was kind of an amazing world. I know it primarily through Del Martin and Phyllis Lyons, who were these pioneering, groundbreaking activists in San Francisco. And in the 1950s, they organized a series of potlucks at their home, and women could come. They were coffee chats. If you were scared about coming out, if you were really unsure about having anyone else know that you were a lesbian, you could still sort of stop in and commit to just a cookie or a brownie, a cup of coffee, meeting other women. I think potlucks too, originally, in a way, they're like anti-patriarchal because nobody is in charge. I mean, there's a host who makes like the urn of coffee, but nobody's in charge. There's no set menu. There are no rules apart from just bringing something to eat and being part of the conversation.
That's true. It's socialist, it's anarchist, because like you said, you don't have to bring something. The people who bring can provide for those who can't. And
yes, exactly.
Of course, John is thrilled to see queer folks loudly out and proud in all aspects of the food world today.
I'm amazed that we're at this moment now, that things have changed so quickly. Mm-hmm. And that was also part of why I wanted to write my book, was that in this blossoming embrace of queer food, I wanted people to know where this came from, who their ancestors were, how we came to this moment.
Karen is a master of Italian food. Coming up after the break, she tells me the secret to making award-winning pasta dishes and why her menu calls cacio e pepe, pepe e cacio.
Italian cuisine, Italian food, Italian culture has really been my passion for 20 years. I visited Italy for the first time when I was in college in my 20s. And I stayed with a friend's family who took us in, 3 of us in, toured us all around, introduced us to other family members. The sense of hospitality and family and the culture of Italy was what I really fell in love with. And I felt like I knew I had to live there. I had to understand it better. And I moved there when I was maybe 29. I moved to Modena in Emilia-Romagna, and I lived there for about a year and a half. And I worked as a cook. I did an unpaid stage. I worked as a cook. I worked as a pasta maker. I worked as a pastaiolo in a pastificio, and I worked as a chef. I got a job as a chef, and I worked in a spa enoteca. And I mean, I think that is probably the most formative time and the most formative part of my career, partially the learning, but also partially just like understanding the cuisine and the culture and becoming, as so many of us do, really enamored with it. I mean, we try and travel to Italy at least once a year, if not twice a year. And I really try to teach my staff at the restaurants to be, we want to be ambassadors of Italian culture and cuisine.
Isn't that kind of hospitality amazing? I feel like I've had so many moments like that traveling where people really step in. Like I've had times where I couldn't speak the same language and people took me to do things all day. And for me, I'd be like, oh, it'd be so awkward. I wouldn't have probably initiated it. But the hospitality, I feel like in other countries is so strong. They're so proud to show you their culture and where they live.
I had an experience, I'll try and keep it short, but I had an experience when I was in Naples, and it was when I was living in Italy, but I traveled around a lot. And I was in Naples, and I went to Naples to eat pizza, like as you do. And I was sitting during aperitivo. I was outside sitting at a cafe, and I was having a cocktail, and I was reading a book, and there was a table of young girls, maybe about my age, maybe a little younger. And they'd kind of been looking at me, and one of them asked me where I was from. I spoke Italian fairly well at that point. I'd been living there for quite some time. And they were like, wait, you're not Italian? And they were like, well, why did you come here? Why did you come here to Napoli? And I said to eat pizza. And they were like, well, we're going to take you to eat pizza. And they took me around, and They were like, we're going to take you to all the best pizza places in Naples. And they did. They didn't know me. They didn't have to do that. There was no, like you just literally met this girl just at a cafe at a table, and they really took me under their wing. And when does that happen? Right? That's magic.
And those are the stories you remember forever. So there's a million Italian restaurants in this country. Americans love Italian food, but there's like a pretty big spectrum of like the quality, and you've won so many awards and have so many accolades. How do you make Italian food better than average? Like really knock it out of the park?
For the most part, I think that my food is really rooted in tradition. It's incredibly important to me to pay respect, to pay homage to Italian cuisine, that I continuously travel. And I travel and I cook with, I've made pasta with women all over Italy. And I continue to do so. I continue to learn. I continue to grow. I continue to be a student. And then to bring that back and try and really reflect that tradition in our food. And I look at it through a modern lens. How are the previous places and the chefs that I learned from, how does that influence my cooking? And so I think that there is a great deal of tradition in my cooking. And then I think there's always just like a little something, sometimes a little twist, a little tweak, just a little something that makes it craveable or interesting to people. And I think that's one of the reasons it's been so well received commercially and critically. And I'd like to think we do a pretty good job. I was in the restaurant, I was working on a new dish, and one of my bartenders said, "Chef, do you know that there is a couple from Milan and they have come in the last 17 nights in a row?"
Oh my God.
They said this is the only place that they want to eat because the food is actually Italian food.
Wow.
And so, right, like, could you have a bigger compliment? And we actually do get a lot. And our pepe e cacio, people always say, I have not had anything that tasted like this since I've been in Rome. And the reason I call it pepe e cacio instead of cacio e pepe is respect, because it's not traditional. I make it with goat butter. There is no butter in cacio e pepe. There should not be. I am 100% aware of that. And so saying we're going to make cacio e pepe, but we're going to use goat butter specifically because I wanted to use goat butter in this dish and pink peppercorns, and it's so delicious. But calling it pepe e cacio instead of cacio e pepe is my nod to say, yes, I know this tastes very traditional, but I realize that it's not. And so I'm acknowledging and respecting that.
That's smart. That's a very clever way to do it. Although I'm sure the servers
no one else
get
knows it's fine. I know. And so it makes me feel like I'm doing the right thing.
I was going to say, I wonder if the servers get a lot of people saying, actually, isn't it cacio e pepe?
They don't.
Oh, good. Is there another dish that you can give an example of that you've put your own twist on a traditional Italian dish that is a standout?
So actually, I was going to talk about the raviolo carbonara, but actually one of the dishes I always say that, really built the restaurant. So I lived in Emilia-Romagna. I lived in Modena, but I spent a lot of time in Bologna and a lot of time in Parma. And I learned to make bolognese in Bologna, very, very traditionally. And so I went to Florence a lot. It was a quick train ride, and I could go even if I just went for the day. If I had just Sunday off, I could just go for the day. And I spent a lot of time there. Cingale, wild boar, very popular in Tuscany. I have sort of fused those two memories together. So I make my bolognese with wild boar, not traditional, although the bolognese is very much made in the style that I was taught. It also has more herbs in it. It has a lot of rosemary and thyme. It's a little more herbaceous. And I make it with tagliatelle that I learned to make in Bologna. Wild boar.
That sounds so good.
Yeah,
I'm glad I just ate. I actually ate pasta before this, and I didn't even think about it, but I'm satiated. I can get through this interview. I was kind of in a hurry this morning, and I feel like this must be my undiagnosed ADD. I'm just eat an apple, just grab something fast, you're in a hurry. But then I find myself making pasta alla vodka just for myself for breakfast. And the whole time I'm doing it, I'm going, why am I doing this?
Why am I doing
time to do this? What are you doing? And I was like, I don't know. I just want it. And it was good.
Dad, I'm going to your house for breakfast.
Come on over for breakfast. Yeah, dinner for breakfast is what I say.
That's what we do now. I love that.
I read that you, pre-pandemic, that you hired a yoga teacher to teach free classes for your staff every week, which I think is amazing. And also just a little bit counterintuitive to a lot of the narrative that a lot of us have heard about restaurant culture, which I think has gotten maybe hopefully better in the past several years since there's been a lot of exposure to what was going on in restaurants with the yelling and the abuse and all that. I'm just curious about when you were building your restaurant and, adding in something like this. What is your philosophy? What are some other things you do to take care of your employees? What kind of restaurant do you intentionally run?
It sounds silly. It's we try and do the best we can for each one of our staff. Our management team is so important to us, and we try and really manage and treat everyone as individuals, right? Understand what's important to people, because it's not the same for everyone. We try and be a really open and welcoming place to everyone, and to make sure that everyone knows that all are welcome here and you are free to be your whole 100% self. We also all work really hard. We work really hard. My spouse works really hard. We expect a lot of people, and we know how hard our team works. So we do try to make sure that they feel, I don't want to say rewarded, but feel appreciated. We just did our inaugural Italy trip for our team. So we took 1, 2, 3, 4 of our staff members. We took them to Sicily.
Amazing.
To see where my olive oil, where the olives are harvested and where it's bottled. The team I work with at Bona Fortuna, we wanted to thank them for all of their hard work. We wanted them to have an amazing experience. And we've wanted to do this for a really long time. We would love to make it a yearly trip. Right now, I think it's going to be every other year, but we want to make sure that we're doing that for our team to enrich them and help educate them, and also say thank you for everything that you do. So this was born out of, actually, you mentioned was the yoga teacher. We hired the teacher so that anyone from the restaurant could come in to a free yoga class once a week. But here's one of the things. Not everyone does yoga. Not everybody wants to do yoga. Not everyone wants to come to work before their shift to do yoga.
Right.
Not everyone feels comfortable doing yoga in front of other people. So we thought this was such a nice thing to do. We didn't really think about it. It's probably nice for some people.
Right.
But is it nice for everyone? So we established what we call a wellness credit. So our managers get $100 a month to spend on anything that is going to make their well-being better. So that can go towards a chiropractor, that can go towards a massage, that can go to your running shoes, that could go towards fixing your bicycle, that could go toward whatever it is that makes you happy, makes your life better, brings you some wellness physically, mentally, emotionally, we give our team $100 a month to spend specifically on that.
That is so nice. I want to work for you. And that was Karen Akunowicz last meal. Next time you find yourself in Boston, check out Karen's restaurants, Bar Volpe and Fox and the Knife. And look out for her on TV. She judges shows like Beat Bobby Flay and Top Chef. Thanks to John Birdsall, author of What is Queer Food? Pick it up wherever books are sold. Your Last Meal is a product of Seattle's Cascade PBS. Go to cascadepbs.org to become a member, and for as little as $7 a month, you get on-demand access to all PBS programming, including dozens and dozens and dozens of food shows, everything from Julia Child to my show, The Nosh. Speaking of, you can watch the first 2 seasons of The Nosh on cascadepbs.org, on YouTube, or in the Alaska In-Flight Entertainment. Season 3 is premiering in May. Woohoo! Sign up for my newsletter. It's also called The Nosh. And if you like the show, and I'm guessing you do because you made it all the way to the end credits, please rate and review in your preferred podcast app. It is a free and easy way to support the show. This episode was produced by me and senior producer Sarah Bernard, who also mixed and mastered it. Original theme music by Prom Queen. I'm Rachel Belle, and this is Your Last Meal.